My girlfriend walked away when I was told I had a terminal illness. I'm not ready to care for you. But when I lived and became successful, she thought I'd take her back. She said I was her home, her forever person. 3 months after I was diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma, she left. Years later, when I survived, she came back, wanting me again. It was a cold January morning, the kind that bites at your bones. I was sitting across from Olivia in a coffee shop, watching my entire world crumble. Look, I'm not here for pity, and I won't paint her as some evil villain, that's just too easy. What I need to know is if I was wrong for what I did years later when she reappeared, after I'd beaten everything, when suddenly I was worth loving again. But let me take you back to the beginning, because you need the full picture to understand who we were before everything fell apart. I met Olivia when I was 24, fresh into my role as a growth strategist for a tech startup in Denver. She was 23, in social media marketing, and we crossed paths at one of those dreadful networking events everyone pretends to enjoy. Olivia had this vibrant, almost performative energy about her, like she was constantly envisioning how each moment would play out in a future story. I was her exact opposite, the guy with spreadsheets and projections, a quiet confidence built on actual results, not just talk. We clicked instantly, or so I thought. That first night, she snapped a photo of us and posted it with some caption about unexpected connections. It felt a little over the top, but I found it charming. Within 3 months, we were living together in my apartment in Highlands. 6 months in, she was already talking about marriage, kids, the whole future package. Looking back now, it's clear we were speaking different languages. When Olivia pictured our future, it was all about aesthetics, the perfect narrative, the version of us that looked good. When I thought about our future, it was retirement accounts, whose career took priority, and what we'd do if one of us ever got sick. I actually brought up the getting sick part once, and she just laughed, saying we were too young for such morbid thoughts. I didn't push it. I was 25, healthy, and stupid enough to believe planning for disaster was the same as preventing it. Then, the diagnosis. It hit on a regular afternoon in October. I'd been drained for weeks, losing weight without trying, and a persistent cough just wouldn't quit. My doctor ordered tests, then more tests, and suddenly I was in an oncology office. Non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Aggressive. Stage 3. Chemotherapy, immediately. The doctor used all those heavy words, and I sat there nodding, pretending to grasp it, but my mind was screaming Olivia's name. How would I tell her? How would this change everything? I called her from the parking lot. She came right away, and when I told her, she cried harder than I did. She held my face and swore, "We'll fight this together. I promise I'm not going anywhere." I believed her. Completely. For the first few weeks, she was incredible. Every appointment, she was there. Taking notes when my brain was too foggy. Researching diets, supplements, alternative treatments. And she posted about it. Not in a truly gross way, but in that performative support kind of way, sharing articles on cancer survival rates with captions about staying strong. Her friends flooded her comments with heart emojis and prayers, and she replied to every single one. I hated the public nature of my illness, but I rationalized it, telling myself she was just processing, that she needed her own support system. What I didn't see then was that she was crafting a narrative, the devoted girlfriend standing by her sick boyfriend. And those narratives only work if there's an audience watching. Chemotherapy began in November, and it was every bit as brutal as they say. The relentless nausea, the crushing exhaustion, food tasting like metal, watching my hair fall out in clumps. But worse than all that was watching Olivia slowly slip away. Not physically, at first. She'd still come, still sit by my hospital bed, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. She'd scroll through her phone during my infusions. When I tried to voice how terrified I was, she'd offer a distant, "I know, baby." Me, too, like she was just reading lines from a script. The social media posts about my illness stopped around week 3 of treatment. When I asked, she said, "I just need some privacy right now." This is really hard for me. How could I tell her it was harder for me without sounding selfish? By December, she was making maybe half my appointments. Always an excuse: work was busy, she wasn't feeling well, she needed to take care of her mental health. That last one really stung. What was I supposed to say? That my literal cancer was less important than her mental health? I wasn't that person. So, I just said I understood and tried not to dwell on the fact that I was facing the scariest thing in my life essentially alone. My parents lived far away and could only visit once a month. My brother was deployed. It was supposed to be Olivia and me against this, but increasingly, it was just me. The breaking point arrived in early January. I'd just endured my worst chemo round yet, barely able to keep water down. Olivia had asked to meet at a coffee shop near my apartment to talk. I knew. I saw it in the way she avoided my eyes, the way she was already crying before she even spoke. I can't do this anymore, Ethan, she finally said. I just can't. I asked what she meant, even though I already knew. She wasn't ready to be a caregiver, she explained, too young to spend her life in hospitals, that she deserved to actually live instead of watching someone die. That last bit, watching someone die, that's what truly got me. The casual certainty that my death was a foregone conclusion. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just sat there and let her finish. I think she wanted me to fight, to beg her to stay. When I didn't, she looked almost offended. Say something, she demanded. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and said, I hope you find what you're looking for. And that was it. She blocked my number, blocked me on every social media platform, even blocked my family when my mom tried to reach out. It was like I had died already, and she was simply moving on. Later, through a mutual friend, I found out she'd posted something about choosing herself, setting boundaries, and healing from toxic relationships. People were rallying behind her, treating her like the victim. I was alone in my apartment, bald, nauseous, genuinely unsure if I'd survive the next 6 months. And she was being lauded for her bravery in leaving. The irony hit me hard. During those months after she left, when I was at my absolute lowest and there was nobody there to witness it, a truth became clear: Olivia didn't leave because I was sick. She left because I became a risk. As long as I was healthy, successful, building a good life, I was a worthy investment. The moment I became uncertain, the moment loving me required actual sacrifice instead of just Instagram captions, I stopped being worth it. She wasn't a monster. She was just someone who loved the idea of me more than the reality. And when those two things diverged, she chose herself. A part of me doesn't even blame her for that. But here's what nobody tells you about rock bottom: it's actually pretty stable. Once you're there, once you've lost everything you thought mattered, you stop living for other people's approval. You start living because you're still breathing, and you might as well do something with that. In February, lying in a hospital bed, alone save for the nurses and doctors, I made a decision. If I was going to die, I would die building something that mattered. If I was going to live, I would live for someone who chose me without guarantees. Doctors gave me a 30% chance of survival. The first month after Olivia left, I actually wondered if I even wanted to beat those odds. That's the part nobody talks about with cancer. It's not just your body fighting, it's your mind deciding if the fight is worth it. And when you're alone at 3 a.m., throwing up into a hospital toilet, the answer isn't always obvious. But in late February, something shifted. After a particularly brutal chemo session, I opened my laptop in bed and pulled up the business plan I'd shelved before my diagnosis, a growth strategy framework I'd developed for scaling startups. I'd shown it to Olivia once. She'd called it cool but asked when it would make real money. Now, with nothing but time, I figured if I was going to die anyway, I might as well work on something that mattered to me. I started rebuilding that framework from my hospital bed, emailing former clients, offering cheap consulting sessions just to keep my mind occupied. The progress was slow. Some days I couldn't get out of bed. Some days the brain fog was so bad, coherent sentences were a challenge. But I kept at it. My doctor said keeping busy might help, that patients with purpose tend to respond better to treatment. I didn't know if that was science or just a line he fed dying people, but I didn't care. By March, I had 3 clients. By April, 7. By May, I realized I was building something truly scalable. The irony wasn't lost on me, planning a future I might not live to see. But that's what hope looks like when you're dying, it's working anyway. That's when I met Chloe. She was one of the oncology nurses on my floor, late 20s, with a completely no-nonsense attitude I appreciated after months of people tiptoeing around me like I was already gone. She didn't do the sad voice. Didn't treat me like I was fragile. She just did her job, occasionally telling me to stop being dramatic when I complained about the nausea. Our first real conversation was in June. She found me working on my laptop at 2 a.m. and asked why I was awake. I quipped, "I'll rest when I'm dead," and she shot back, "At this rate, that'll be sooner than you think." I actually laughed, the first time in months. She sat down, asked what I was working on. I explained the framework, expecting boredom or a platitude, but instead, she asked precise questions about market positioning and customer acquisition. She was actually listening. After that, she'd stop by during her breaks. We'd talk. Not about cancer, not about my chances. Just normal stuff. She told me about her nightmare roommate adopting too many cats, her family in Portland, how she'd wanted to be a pediatric nurse but couldn't handle sick kids, so she chose oncology because at least adults understood what was happening. I told her about my work, about Denver, about everything except Olivia. What was there to say? Our conversations became a routine. Whenever Chloe was on shift, she'd carve out 20 minutes to just sit and be normal with me. I started looking forward to it more than I wanted to admit. She never asked about my personal life, never pushed. There was something incredibly freeing about being around someone who only knew sick me, who didn't have a before version to compare me to. The remission news came in August, almost 10 months after my diagnosis. My oncologist said the tumors had shrunk dramatically, treatment was working beyond expectation. I'd need continued monitoring, but I was officially in remission. I called my parents first, they cried. My brother promised to visit as soon as his leave came through. Then, I just sat in my apartment alone, trying to process that I was actually going to live. Chloe stopped by that evening. She wasn't even on shift, but she'd heard the news. She brought Thai food and joked I couldn't use the death excuse anymore. We ate on my couch and didn't talk about my survival. We just existed in that moment. I remember thinking, this is what contentment feels like. Not excitement, not relief, just quiet gratitude for being alive and for having someone who cared without needing anything from me. My business exploded after that. Turns out, a near-death experience makes you incredibly good at prioritizing business strategy. Clients sought me out for my unique approach. Growth happened faster than I anticipated. By November, I'd hired 2 contractors. By January of the next year, I moved into a small office in downtown Denver. By March, I was making more money than I ever had at my old startup job. I wasn't rich, but I was stable, successful, building something real. Chloe and I started seeing each other outside the hospital around October. Nothing official, just coffee or dinner when her shifts allowed. It felt easy, in a way relationships never had before. She never asked about future plans, never pushed for labels or timelines. She just showed up, letting things develop naturally. I once told her I appreciated how low pressure everything felt. She said something about having seen me when I thought I was dying, so everything after that was just bonus. That hit me hard. The casual way she acknowledged she'd chosen me when there was no guarantee of a future, when loving me was an actual risk. That's when Olivia came back. It was April, over 2 years after she'd left. I got a LinkedIn message request from her. She'd unblocked me, apparently. The message said she'd heard I was doing well, she was so happy for me, that she'd always known I was strong enough to beat it. The exclamation point actually bothered me more than anything else. An hour later, she followed up, saying she knew it had been a long time, but she'd really love to reconnect, that she'd done a lot of growing, and thought I'd be proud of the person she'd become. I stared at those messages for a long time, trying to figure out what I felt. The answer? Nothing. Just a mild curiosity about what could possibly make her think I'd want to hear from her now. I didn't respond, but she kept trying. Messages about following my company's growth, how she'd always believed in my potential, how she'd thought about me often over the past 2 years. That last one made me truly angry. If she'd thought about me so often, she could have unblocked me at any point during the months when I actually needed someone. She could have checked in when I was bald, vomiting, and uncertain. But she only came back when it was safe, when I was successful again, when loving me was convenient. One night, I showed the messages to Chloe. She read them without a word, then handed my phone back and simply asked what I wanted to do. Not what should you do, or offering her opinion, just what do you want? I said I didn't know yet. She told me to figure it out, but not to let Olivia make me forget who was actually there when it mattered. Then she went back to reading her book, like we'd just been discussing what to order for dinner. Olivia eventually asked to meet in person, saying she wanted closure or to explain herself or something. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at the same coffee shop where she'd broken up with me. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. Physically, she looked the same, but there was this desperate energy, like she was trying too hard to seem casual. She ordered some complicated drink, sat down, and immediately launched into how mature she was now, how she'd been in therapy, how she understood she'd handled things badly but had been young and scared. She talked for almost 20 minutes about her journey of self-discovery, all the work she'd done, how she'd realized what truly mattered. Then she dropped it. If I'd known you were going to survive, that things would turn out okay, maybe I would have made different choices. That single sentence. It told me everything. She hadn't come back because she'd realized she loved me. She'd come back because I'd become a safe bet again. The risk had passed. Suddenly, I was a worthwhile investment again. I let her keep talking, explaining, justifying, rationalizing. When she finally stopped and looked at me, expectant, I realized she genuinely thought this was working, that I'd take her back. She reached across the table for my hand and said, I never stopped caring about you, Ethan. I just needed time to become someone strong enough to handle hard things. I pulled my hand back. You needed time, I corrected, or you needed me to stop being a hard thing. She had no answer. I stood up and told her I appreciated her honesty, but I'd moved on. She looked genuinely shocked, as if it hadn't occurred to her I might not want her back. As I walked out, I heard her ask if there was someone else. I didn't answer. It wasn't about Chloe. It was about Olivia showing me exactly who she was when things got difficult, and I had finally decided to believe her. I called Chloe from my car and told her about the meeting. She asked how I felt. Free, I said. Like I've finally closed a chapter one didn't even realize was still open. She told me she'd just adopted another cat and her roommate was going to kill her, so she might need a place to crash. I laughed and told her to come over. That night, sitting on my couch with Chloe and her newest rescue cat, I realized this was what I'd survived for. Not the success, not the money, not even the vindication. Just the quiet, simple joy of being chosen by someone who'd seen me at my worst and stayed anyway. Chloe moved in 3 weeks after that coffee shop meeting with Olivia. Not some grand romantic gesture, but because her roommate actually did kick her out over the cat situation, and my apartment was bigger anyway. It felt natural, the way good things do when they aren't forced. I remember thinking how different it was from living with Olivia. No performance. No checking in before posting photos. No narrative we were trying to sell to the world. Chloe just existed in my space like she'd always been there, leaving her nursing scrubs on the bathroom floor and stealing my coffee in the mornings. It was mundane, and it was perfect, in a way I hadn't known relationships could be. Olivia didn't stop trying after that first meeting. She started texting from a new number I hadn't blocked, always late at night, probably drinking, feeling nostalgic for a version of us that never actually existed. The messages were long, rambling, about how she'd made a mistake, how she'd been too immature, how if I'd just give her another chance, she could prove she was different now. She sent articles about forgiveness and second chances, quoted podcasts about people deserving grace for their worst moments, and claimed her therapist helped her understand she'd been dealing with her own trauma when she left. I didn't respond, but I didn't block the number either. Part of me needed to see how far she'd go, needed confirmation that my read of the situation was correct. The messages escalated. She started showing up places she thought I might be, the coffee shop near my office, the gym I'd rejoined, even the Thai restaurant Chloe and I sometimes got takeout from. It never felt threatening, more pathetic, like she was trying to manufacture a chance encounter to make me realize what I was missing. Once, she actually waited outside my office building and tried to talk to me as I was leaving. She started going on about us, our history, everything we'd built together. I stopped her. "We didn't build anything together," I said. "You were an observer to my life, not a participant." She looked like I'd slapped her. She said she'd loved me, and I told her, "You loved the version of me that was convenient for you." Then I walked away before she could respond. Chloe noticed I was distracted. She asked if everything was okay, and I showed her Olivia's messages. Chloe read through them, her expression growing increasingly annoyed. Finally, she asked if I wanted her to talk to Olivia. She said, "Sometimes it takes hearing it from another woman for the message to sink in." Maybe if Olivia understood I'd actually moved on, she'd stop living in this fantasy. I told her I didn't want her involved in my mess. She just smiled. "My mess is your mess now." That's kind of how relationships work. So, I gave her Olivia's number, honestly not expecting much. Chloe called Olivia the next day while I was at work. I don't know exactly what was said. Chloe refused to give me details, just had this satisfied expression that made me both nervous and a little proud. But whatever she said, it worked. The messages from Olivia stopped completely for about 3 days. Then I got one final text, longer than all the others combined. It ranted about how I'd chosen someone who didn't know the real me, who hadn't been there for the good times, who was essentially a stranger compared to our shared history. She wrote, "She only knows sick you, broken you. She doesn't know who you were before all this." And that's when it hit me, that was exactly the point. Chloe knew me without the mythology, without comparing me to some past version or future ideal. She'd met me at my absolute worst and decided I was enough, exactly as I was. That was worth more than any shared history or nostalgia for better times. I wrote back my first response in weeks, "You're right. She doesn't know who I was before. But unlike you, she didn't need that version of me to decide I was worth staying for." I blocked the number after sending it. And I felt absolutely nothing. No guilt, no sadness. Just relief that this chapter was, finally, truly closed. The final confrontation came in June, almost 3 months after that first coffee shop meeting. Chloe and I were at a networking event for my company. Olivia showed up. I still don't know how she found out. Maybe she followed my company's social media, or heard through mutual connections in Denver's tech scene. But she walked in wearing this expensive dress, clearly chosen to remind me of what I was missing. She didn't approach me immediately, just hovered near the bar, watching. I could feel Chloe tense up beside me when she recognized Olivia. Olivia finally came over when Chloe went to the restroom. She had this weird smile, like we were old friends running into each other. She said she'd seen my company was doing well, that she wasn't surprised because she'd always known I had potential. I stayed silent, waiting for her point. She started talking about how she'd made a mistake, and thought I knew that, implying I couldn't fully move on because of it. I told her I had fully moved on, that I was happy. She actually laughed, like I'd said something funny. You're settling for someone who saw you at your weakest, she said. Don't you see how that's just fear? You're afraid of being with someone who expects you to be great. That's when I realized she genuinely believed this. In her mind, she was the victim. That I was making a mistake by choosing stability over whatever chaotic energy she thought passed for passion. Chloe came back before I could respond. She looked at Olivia for a long moment before introducing herself in this bright, cheerful voice that somehow made everything even more uncomfortable. She said she'd heard so much about Olivia, how it must be difficult seeing me doing well without her, and how she hoped Olivia found whatever it was she was looking for. There was nothing overtly mean in Chloe's words, but the subtext was crystal clear. Olivia just stood there, looking between us, before muttering something about how we didn't know what she and I had together. Then she walked away. We watched her leave. Chloe turned to me and asked if she'd overstepped. I kissed her right there, in the middle of my networking event, in front of everyone. That was the last time I saw Olivia. I heard through friends that she moved to Austin a few months later, something about a new job and a fresh start. And I genuinely hoped she found whatever she was looking for. Not because I forgave her, or because I thought we could ever be friends, but because holding on to anger would mean she still mattered. And she didn't. What mattered was the woman who'd chosen me without guarantees. Who'd seen me at my worst and decided to stay. Who didn't need me to be successful, or healthy, or impressive to think I was worth her time. 2 years later, I'm cancer-free, my company is thriving, and Chloe and I got engaged last month. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Olivia had stayed, if she'd been strong enough to handle the hard parts. And I realize we still would have ended eventually, because we were fundamentally incompatible. She needed someone who looked good in her story. I needed someone who'd stay when the story got ugly. People sometimes ask me if I feel bad about not giving Olivia another chance, if I think I was too harsh or unforgiving. The answer is no. And here's why: forgiveness doesn't mean reopening doors that closed for good reasons. Olivia showed me exactly who she was when life got difficult, when loving me required actual sacrifice instead of just Instagram captions and coffee dates. She made her choice, and I respected it enough not to pretend it didn't happen just because circumstances changed. I survived cancer, built a successful business, and found someone who chose me without needing proof I'd be worth the investment. Olivia wanted back in when the risk was gone, when I was safe again. And that's not love. That's just opportunism dressed up in therapy language and second-chance rhetoric. So, do you think I was wrong for not taking back my ex-girlfriend, who left me when I was dying, but wanted me back when I survived and became successful?